Hello, this is Dr. Anthony Festmeyer, and this lesson I'm going to go through how I approach the 7 positions of the melodic minor scale on the guitar. Now, if you haven't checked out my video on the 7 positions of the major scale, be sure to do that first. Now, before we get into the positions, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the melodic minor scale, do a little bit of music theory. Now, first of all, if we take the piano and we take the white keys from C to C on the piano, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, we have what is known as the C major scale. Now, we can start a major scale on any key of the piano, basically any note, and it will always follow the pattern of whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. So if we go to the 6th note of any major scale, in this case the C major scale, C, D, E, F, G, A would be the 6th note, and we just take those notes from A to A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, the white keys on the piano, we have what is known as the relative minor key. So C major, A minor would be the relative minor key. But that scale from A to A is known as the natural minor scale. Now, if we do a couple of tweaks to that scale, we'll have the melodic minor scale. So if we go to the 6th note, F, raise that by a half step, becomes F sharp. And then we also go to the 7th note, G, raise that by a half step to G sharp. We have what is known as the ascending version of the melodic minor scale. Now, in traditional music theory, the melodic minor scale also has a descending version where we remove the G sharp and the F sharp, bring them back to G natural and F natural, basically return it to the natural minor scale, and use that for the descending version of the scale. Now, this scale that we're talking about today and applying to the guitar is often referred to as jazz melodic minor. We only use the ascending version, and we also use those notes as the descending version of the scale. Okay, let's go ahead and apply this to the guitar. Now, in my video on major scales, I talk about the concept of position. Make sure that you go back and review that first before moving on to this video. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to an A. We're going to work on A melodic minor. And this scale will be in the 6th position of the guitar, 1st position of the scale, but the 6th position of the guitar. So my first finger will be at the 6th fret, and my fingers will line up 6, 7, 8, and 9. However, the A note is back at the 5th fret, so I'm going to reach my first finger back to that 5th fret to grab the A note. A, B, C. The next string, D, E, F sharp. Notice the stretch between my 1st and 2nd fingers for both of those strings. Now for the D string, my 1st finger will move up to the 6th fret, and I'll play G sharp, A, and B. On the G string, I'm going to reach back to the C, C, D, E. Again, getting that stretch between these 2 fingers. And then on the B string, I've got only 2 notes, F sharp and G sharp, and then my high E string and low E string will have the same notes, A, B, C. So that entire scale is. Now make sure that you practice in both ascending like that and descending. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the 2nd position of that scale. So I'm going to move my 1st finger up to a B. I'm going to line my fingers up. This is technically the 7th position on the guitar. And I'm going to start with B, C, and D, just continuing up those 7 notes of the melodic minor scale, just now starting on the 2nd note of that scale. So I'm going to play B, C, D, E, F sharp, reach my pinky up to a G sharp at the 11th fret. Then I've got A, B, C. My pinky comes back to the 10th fret. And then I've got just two notes, D and E. On the B string, I've got three notes, F sharp, G sharp, and A. And then my high E string and low E string are the same, B, C, D. So that entire scale is this. Okay, moving on to the third position of the A melodic minor scale. I'm going to move my first finger up to C, which is the third note of the scale. And this one will be in the 9th position on the guitar, but my first finger is going to stretch back to the 8th fret on a C. And I've got a stretch between my first and second fingers at first. So I'm going to do C, D, E on the low E string. But now my first finger needs to move up to the 9th fret. I'm going to play F sharp, G sharp, and pinky on A. On the next string, I'm going to play B, C, D. Only two notes on the G string, E and F sharp. First finger hits a G sharp on the B string, second A, pinky B, and then my high E string, C, D, E, just like the low E string. So I've got this. Okay, so for the next position of the scale, I'm going to move my first finger up to a D note, 4th position of the melodic minor scale, but actually the 11th position of the guitar. So I'm going to go ahead and line my fingers up starting at the 11th fret, but I'm going to reach back to the 10th fret to grab that D note. So this is going to be D, E, F sharp, again stretch between these first two fingers. Then I move my first finger back to the 11th fret and I play a G sharp, A, and a B with the pinky. First finger moves back again to grab a C, second finger on D, pinky on E. First finger moves back up to the 11th fret for the G string, and I'll play three notes here, F sharp, G sharp, and A. Two notes on the B string, B and C, second and third fingers, and then I reach back for that D, E, F sharp on the high E, just like on the low E. Here's that entire scale. All right, now we're on to the 5th position of the scale. I'm going to move up here to the 12th fret of the guitar. Now this scale is going to be technically in the 13th position, but my first finger reaches back to the 12th fret. So again, I get that little stretch between my first and second fingers. And this is going to be E, F sharp, G sharp. First finger on A, B, C. First finger on D, D, E, F sharp. Now my first finger moves up to the 13th fret, plays a G sharp and A, and then finally a B with my pinky. First finger catches that C at the 13th fret, then D, and then my first finger moves back to E, F sharp, and G sharp on the high E string, just like the low E string. Here's that 5th position. All right, next up is the 6th position of the scale. I'm going to move my first finger up here to an F sharp, and I could either play it up here in this area, or I could take it down an octave and play it here at the 2nd fret. For our example, I'll go ahead and play it up here. Now my fingers are going to line up at the 14th position, and it's going to stay there. So I've got F sharp, G sharp, A with the pinky. Then I've got B, second finger, C, D with the pinky. Then I've got E, F sharp with the ring finger, but my pinky reaches way up to grab a G sharp here. Then on the next string, I've got A, B, C. Then only two notes on the B string. I've got D and E, and then the high E string again is F sharp, G sharp, and A, just like the low E string. So here's that sixth position. Okay, one more position, the seventh position. I could continue all the way up here, put my first finger on that G sharp and go ahead and play it here, but I'm going to go ahead and take this one down an octave. I'm going to put my first finger at the 4th fret. This will be in the 4th position, and I'm going to play G sharp, A, B. Reach my first finger back to grab a C, C, D, E. First finger comes back up to grab an F sharp, then G sharp, pinky on A. Next string is B, C, D, first, second, pinky. And then just 2 notes on the B string, E, F sharp. And then the high E string, like the low, is G sharp, A, and B. So the 7th position of the melodic minor scale looks like this. Okay, now it's really important to understand that that is just one key of the scale where we've covered 7 positions, and really all of those notes anywhere on the guitar, those 7 notes of that scale. Now I can transition this to any minor key. So for example, I could come here and I could start on a G note instead. Our first position of the A melodic minor scale started with A, B, C. For the G melodic minor scale, it would go G, A, B flat. And so it's important to understand the theory behind the scale, but basically you just translate these 7 positions to any key by following the notes of that scale on the low E string and working through these 7 different positions. All right, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching.